Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for hitting that play button for another episode of Learning from Men podcast, where I am on a mission to learn from men so that I can better serve men. Today, I have my dear friend Jonathan Hall on with me, and I'm going to allow Jonathan to give you as much information as he wants to about who he is and the work he does and any aspect of family or anything like that. And so, Jonathan, so glad to have you on today.
Dr. Hetty, it is an honor to be here, my friend. I'm so glad to be here, bro. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. Jonathan, tell the people a little bit about who you are and what you do, and if you want to tell anything about your family.
Excellent. Born and raised east side of Oklahoma City. For those from Oklahoma, you should be familiar with the east side, if, especially from Oklahoma City. Born and raised here, Douglas High School Trojan alum. So I love my high school. I went on to UCO to graduate there, got my degree in business administration. Married the beautiful Detra. We've been together, man, it'll be 35 years come June,
Are
which
you
is
serious?
absolutely crazy. So send money so we can go on a cruise. So thank you for that. We have two amazing kids. Our son, the Prince Kelton, lives up in Tulsa, and our daughter, the Princess Courtney, is residing in Chicago right now. So yeah, born and raised Oklahoma City. Did a lot of work in corporate with Cox Communications here in OKC. Back in 2014, my bride and I moved to the Atlanta area, which was surprising for us. We had never planned on moving, being born and raised here, family here, and everything. But the Lord had plans for us, so we moved. And I have to admit, when he mentioned moving, I wasn't as obedient as I should have been. So I kind of fought it, right? But we moved and had an amazing time there. Got a great community, a great church there. We were there for 11 years. And one of the amazing things that happened during that time, I did start my own business as a men's style consultant. So I love that all my life. You know, being in Atlanta area, there are a lot of entrepreneurs. So I started my own business there still while being in corporate world. So I did it part time. And then got laid off from Cox when I got there. So I'm like, Jesus, what happened? I moved here for you. Then you laid me off. What's the deal? What's going on here? And then I did some work for Comcast as a project manager and also did some Six Sigma black belt stuff, you know. So that was great. Left corporate completely in August of 2023 to focus on my business. I also added on some professional development aspects and workforce readiness. So that's what I do. Men's style consulting, focus more on the lines of professional development, workforce readiness, work with public schools, nonprofits, and organizations doing that kind of work. So I love it.
That's cool, man. How has that men's style? I'm thinking about the Atlanta area versus the Oklahoma City area. Uh,
Hmm.
Now, this is just in my ignorance, like, but I know Atlanta's much bigger, more populated. I can see that jumping off really well. Has there been a big uh, um, difference in the two areas as far as that line of work?
Great question, Haiti, because what I forgot to add is that we were there for 11 years. I just came back to my hometown, OKC. The Lord brought us back to Oklahoma City. I came back the end of July last summer, 2025. My bride came down a month later after we sold our house there. So, in the return to my hometown, I did not intend on continuing that part of my consulting. I said, okay, I'm going to go back to OKC, focus on professional development, workforce readiness, and I'm not going to do the style consulting thing anymore. I said that market's smaller, have fewer options, fewer people probably think about that stuff. I said, so really to move my business, I need to focus on something that I think could pop off a little faster and has a greater need. So I didn't intend on doing that when I got back. But as I went through the process of meeting people, I would get people going, hey, I checked out your social media and I see some style. You still do that kind of thing? Because I need help. So literally, I had not presented myself at that part of my business. And so I've had a couple of people say, "Hey, I need some help." So that's kind of how that popped off here in Oklahoma. I hadn't thought about it or intended on doing it. It is definitely a different market. Of course, I love my hometown. Atlanta's a huge metro area,
Yeah.
population, probably 4 or 5 times the size of ours. And because of that, they have more of the things that go along with that. Different type of stores and styles. So it is a little more, I have to be a little more creative, right? And focusing on taking care of my individual clients. But I'm up to the challenge. So yeah, it is definitely different.
That's cool. Talk to me about what, when you say professional development, working with school nonprofits, what does that look like for you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Great question. Before I left corporate, I worked with people. I don't know if you ever heard of Toastmasters, but I started a Toastmasters club while I was with Comcast because I was really concerned about some of my colleagues didn't have the presentation skills or they weren't very confident or leadership skills. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. And if you're not a good communicator, bro, it's gonna be horrible, right? So I was really adamant about that skill. And then people started asking me about executive presence. How do I show up at the meeting? Even before I start talking, how do I run the meeting? And so I started both of those programs at Comcast even before I left, and they still are a part of talent acquisition there. And so when I started my own business, I just basically started doing that for my clients instead of doing that for the company. And what that looks like is that if I'm working for a school, I may talk to them about social skills. I learned that COVID really, wreaked havoc on some of our students. So even a firm handshake, saying your name clearly, giving eye contact, those kind of things that I had teachers and educators ask me to come and work on. They've even asked me to talk about hygiene. They're like, these kids don't, they just don't get it. Not all of them, but they said it's been a challenge. So I talked about those kind of things. And also, how do you dress? I learned from some of the educators that the kids thought that dressing up was putting on a hoodie versus a t-shirt. It's like, no, that's not quite what we mean here, right? And so in a school setting, that's how that looks. If I'm working for an organization, I can talk about, are you conducting your meetings the right kind of way? And I can talk about the dress code too. It's gotten really casual, but you can be classy casual, And one of the things that I've learned is that it's been scientifically proven that first impressions happens within 3 to 7 seconds. So fair or not, that's what happens. And a big part of it is how you're dressed. So if you walk into a room to present, people automatically go, 3 to 5 seconds, and they kind of come to a conclusion in their mind. Is this somebody I'm going to listen to? Do they look credible? Do they look like they know what they're talking about? So you can put yourself at a disadvantage immediately. And then you're literally working uphill, with your slide deck, with everything, your research, whatever it is. So I work with my clients to come in and go, okay, you dress appropriately. Different cultures and industries dress different ways, right? So you dress just above what that is. So automatically go, oh, looks like this guy knows what he's talking about. Let's see what he's got going. And then boom, you go into your presentation. So it does look different if I'm talking to students of a certain age or if I'm coming into a corporation to talk to their young professionals. But it's applicable in every area of life when you talk about the way you conduct yourself, the way you dress, your social skills, your hygiene. Just depends on, I tailor it for the audience. So that's kind of what it looks like.
That's cool. Did you ever see yourself doing this?
Yes, I wanted to go straight into fashion style consulting when I got out of high school. And my parents
Oh,
said, that's a no. They were like, that's not happening. You need to go to school, get a degree, and get a real job. And I was mad. I was like, what? And I had friends coming out of Frederick Douglass High School going straight to New York to do fashion. So I was like, I knew it was an opportunity and a possibility, but my parents didn't see it. So yeah, so it's funny that, many, many years later, I'm back in that area. But yeah, I did see me doing the style consulting piece. I did see that, and just through my time in corporate, I found myself in front of people, helping them learn how to present, talk to others, do those kind of things. So over time, I saw myself doing that part.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, can I wear a double breasted with jeans? Like, I love double breasted, but I'm not a person who loves to dress up. But I like a good double breasted pair of jeans. What is that okay to do? Is that give me a little fashion? Give me some tips on double breasted. What's okay, what's not?
I love double breasted. They've made a comeback. If you're going to wear a suit coat or a sports coat, some of the rules are that it can't be a jacket that goes with the suit to go with jeans. That's just, can't do that because the texture is different, the cut is different. If you have a straight sports coat, those are cut different, texture different. So you can wear those with jeans. The right kind of jeans makes a difference. If you're going to do jeans with a sports coat, you probably want to go to dark denim. You don't want to go with anything with like rips in it or too light. So yeah, if you're going to do a sports coat, the best thing, is to go something in a dark denim.
Got you, got you. Uh, what's your favorite brand?
Of clothing,
Yeah, clothing. Yeah.
wow. I would say right now it's a brand called it's by Jerry Lorenzo, Fear of God. And he has a casual line, with called Essentials. You'll see a lot of essentials, hoodies, and things of that sort. And then he has a more of a luxury line called Fear of God, where he even does suits and things of that sort. I love that brand, him being a black man in that world, Fear of God really talks about his faith and he's just been doing some amazing things. I mean, he does sneakers, suits, he does casual stuff, hoodies. That's probably my favorite brand right now.
What is your best tip for men regarding if they need to get a let me see a good date night outfit? What's your tip to help them stay within budget?
Great question. One of the things I do is really for my clients kind of tailor make for them because everybody's different. It's not cookie cutter. So it depends on what are you comfortable in because if you're not comfortable in it, you're going to just be fidgeting, and just not be confident, which is going to backfire. Now, once I build a relationship with my clients, I do push them a little bit, to go beyond their norm. So I do some of that. So I'm going to say, what are you comfortable with? What's the dress code of where you're going? Right? That's an important question. And so we'll start from there because everybody's different. Some people look better in a double breasted than a single breasted, right? But maybe they just need to go casual,
Yeah.
right? So it just kind of depends. So if you gave me a scenario where you're going and why, I can narrow it down a lot easier.
All right. I think you're. I think we're around the same age. You may be a little bit older than me or not, but when you hear the word gills, what comes to mind?
When I hear the word gills, I think no.
No.
Something. That's what comes to mind.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah. That's my first thought.
Yeah.
We can maybe
Yeah. What was your
that's
favorite
just right
store
at
in
the top
high
of my
school?
head. My favorite store in high school, wow, this is gonna take me back a little bit, was Oak Tree men's
Okay.
clothing store. And I used to manage one actually the first time I moved out of the house. I moved to Tulsa to open up a brand new Oak Tree
Wow.
store in Promenade Mall in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I remember I was the youngest person in the store and I was the manager. That was rough. That was, especially at that age, I was probably 18, maybe 19 at the most. And they used to tease me because I couldn't get into the club, and they'd all go to the club afterwards. And it was But I love the store because it was a little more trendy. I don't know if trendy is the right word, but so yeah, it's a little more trendy. One of the more trendier places around. So I did love Oak Tree.
Wow, yeah, damn. Was there only one in Quell Springs, or was there one in Penn and?
It was just the one in Quell, I believe,
Yeah.
because Quell was the biggest one in the region. So literally, after I was in Tulsa for 2 years, I moved back to KC and ran the one in Quell Springs.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I remember Oak Tree. Just to get a little bit more, know you a little bit more. Let me ask you: if you could have dinner with any man from history, who would it be and why? Outside of Jesus.
Outside of Jesus, yeah, me and Jesus have dinner all the time now anyway. So that one's, I would say, man, ML King pops off immediately. ML King Jr., I should say to be specific.
Yeah.
Why? He is such an amazing orator. You know, if you read his books and his writings, it is phenomenal. I mean, he was like in college, I want to say at age like 15 or 16. People don't know that about him. Unbelievably brilliant. I would ask him about some of more of his inspirations. I know Gandhi was an inspiration for him later on. I would ask him more about early on, what motivated you to be so brilliant, to get into college so fast? So I would ask him about that because some of his writings are just phenomenal. I would also ask him about that last speech he gave on April the 3rd, 1968, that night. And he was assassinated in Memphis on August the 4th, 1968. And he gave that speech and he talked about, I've been to the mountaintop.
Mm.
And then when he ended that speech, I watched the video a billion times. And as he ended the speech and everybody was clapping, he turned away slightly and said a few more words that were not caught on the audio. My question would be, what did you say?
Mm.
I've tried to watch it and go, what did he I
Analyzing
just
it.
love that speech because you could just see it in his face that I believe that he knew. You could just see it in his face is that I'm going to give this my all. This is it. I've done everything I can. My time is now. I just believe that from that speech. And it was just, when I was a kid, I used to have the cassette tape of his speeches, and I would walk around the house listening to them, memorizing them. And my parents thought something was wrong with me. I was like, I've got to figure out, I've got to remember this. This has to be imprinted on my mind. So, yeah, a little bit about why I would want to have that conversation with him.
Thinking about that and the question that you're asking, what has been the best piece of advice you've gotten? Doesn't have to be specifically around manhood, but if so, that's great. But what's the best piece of advice you think you've ever gotten?
That's a piece of advice I've ever gotten. In an indirect way, when I went to college, I didn't go straight to college from high school. Some of us think we know everything at 18. And one of the reasons is because I was working at Jeans West and Crossroads Mall, and I got a chance to open that Oak Tree store in Tulsa. And so I was in college. I was taking college courses at Rose State. And I was like, oh, I get to go have my own place and be a manager. Bro, I just stopped going to class and moved. It's just like, you know. And so I say that to say years later when I moved back, met my wife, got married, she was pregnant with our son, our first child. And I had one more semester of school left at UCO, and I was working in the day at Cox Communications, going to school at night. And I remember my mom was fantastic. She said, "Son, I know what you're trying to do, but right now you are not a good husband nor a good father." I said, "What?" And my mom was always supportive and just amazing. She said, your wife is like, because our kids are only 17 months apart. So our son was like really young and she was pregnant with our daughter. And she said, she needs you at the house. helping. She says, again, I know you're working and going to school. I know what you're trying to do, but right now, you're not a good husband or a good father. And it just slapped me in the face. And the advice was, and I only had one more semester. So it was like, hmm, what if I graduate 6 months later? In the scheme of life, it won't make that big a deal for me because it wasn't like I had a job waiting. I know different things for different people. And I said, and my mom was like, she won't be in this situation again unless I have more kids. But right now, she needs you. And I just thought, man, just to be more aware of the moment and understand and be more intentional about who needs you and what's going on and prioritize. I would never, ever forget my mother saying that, so that's advice in a way. Uh, but man, when she said that to me, it really kind of shook me to my core, but she was right.
Yeah, I'm watching my 20-year-old son be a father and work and do all the things. And yeah, I just wonder sometimes. And I think sometimes it depends on the wife, whatever. Great hindsight on your mom to be able to know, like she could see that. And I sometimes wonder, I want him to be the best husband, be the best husband and father that he can. And so sometimes I wonder, I want to say things like that, but I'm just not sure yet. But man, I think I'm glad to hear you say that because it's like you got to give hard truth, whenever you
Hmm.
truly love somebody. And she said that
Yep,
out of love for all of you. So that's
yep,
really
she did.
that's great. Um, man, looking back, what's probably one thing you wish someone had told you about being a man when you were younger?
Something I wish somebody would have told me about being a man when I was younger. I would say that God gave us emotions for a reason because growing up, I never saw my dad cry after my mom passed. And really the only time I saw him cry after that was related to his dementia. But before that, I'd seen him almost cry once, but that was it. My dad never said, I'm sorry. My dad never said, I'm proud of you. Now, my dad's my hero too. So both can be true. And I think some people have challenges handling the weight of those two. More than those two things can be true, right? I wish somebody would have said, you have emotions for a reason. But I was basically taught you don't cry. You just don't. And I will say there were times where I couldn't because it was a risk because of the environment I was in.
Mm,
In some environments, you cry, bro, you're gonna get jumped,
yeah,
period.
yeah.
You're gonna be labeled. So I wish I was told that God gave you emotions for a reason. You're not led by them, but they are an indicator of what's going on. So you should address that. Not to be led by them. It's a signal, hey, I need to stop and think, why am I feeling this way? One of the reasons, Hedy, I feel that way is that one of the jobs I had at Comcast was I was leading a group of young people and I encouraged them to be aware of their mental health. Well, Comcast offered an employee assistance program, EAP, and they offered like mental health. You could call somebody. I said, I'm gonna call this person and see what it's like because I can't be just telling people to do it and not do it, right? So I set an appointment. And she said, well, what's going on? I said, I don't know, nothing really. But I told her, I said, hey, I've been leading people. I tell them to do this. And so I want to do it. I said, I'm sure you're going to find something if you ask me a couple of questions. I said, I'm sure something's going to pop up, right? So, hey, I'm all in. So she asked me about my family, my dad. And at that point, my dad was still dealing with dementia. And we had in a memory care facility down in Ardmore. So I was still living in Atlanta. So I said, yep, my dad just turned 90. I flew to Oklahoma City, drove an hour down to Ardmore. The nursing staff had this little cake for him and everything, and he didn't remember me.
Mm.
And growing, my dad and I have the same first name. He didn't have a middle name, but I do. So my middle name is Maurice. So growing up, people was in our house, they would say Jonathan Maurice, so they knew they was talking to me. So dad didn't remember me. And the nurses were like, it's Jonathan. He flew all the way in from Atlanta. I was there with my brother Sean. It's Jonathan. He flew from Atlanta. So, and then I said, oh, I know. I said, I'll say Jonathan Maurice in his ear. And I know that'll click. I said, Pops, it's Jonathan Maurice. It's Jonathan Maurice. And he just looked at me like just a glazed over look. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm like, wow, the doctors warned us about this. So I was explaining this to my therapist, right? And she says, well, how did you feel? I was like, I was like, oh, dang, that's kind of rough. Well, she said, no, how did that make you feel? I said, I just told you. It's kind of rough, it's kind of not cool, but hey, she said, you don't even know, do you? I
Mm.
said, I just told you. She said, I need you to tell me, express some. I said, yo, what am I supposed to do? I said, my dad don't remember me. At least I was there for him. The doctors told me that. That's how it is. What else am I supposed to do? She said, you don't. She says, I need you to. She says, well, how did your body feel? I'm like, what do you mean, how did my body feel? What's that got to do with anything? And so Hetty, she's asking me these questions, and she says, you don't even have an answer, and you don't even know. And she says, I'm not telling you to go back to that moment and stay there. I am asking you to, when you encounter these moments, to stop and ask yourself, how do I feel? How does my body feel? She says, it's like if you get a cut on your arm, you really need to get that cleaned out, make sure everything's clean before you bandage it, put the ointment on, and all that kind of stuff. You don't stay there with it, but you make sure it's clean. She says, I need you to feel your emotions and kind of dig that out, make sure it's clean, because you don't take care of that scratch or that cut on your arm, it might have to be amputated because you haven't dealt with it. And she said, I don't want you later in life to all of a sudden this amputation comes out in an emotional way where you're never expecting it. So again, that goes back to I wish, and I'm still working on that because all of my life it's just like, I don't got time for that. That's bad, but boom. And she said, again, don't go back and get stuck, but deal with it, clean it out, think about it. How do you feel? Move on in a healthy way. So I wish I knew how to do that better. I think that's one of the reasons men's life is shortened because of that bottled up emotion. I also think that's why we don't have friendship like we should, because we don't understand that. And I think we go through life, and that's a part of it we're missing out on.
Yeah.
Life could be fuller if we understood our emotions. Not only fuller in every day, it could be longer. We could be with our children more. We could be with our grandchildren longer to impart wisdom, favor, and blessing if we knew and understood how to manage our emotions better.
That's good. I teach relationship classes, and we used to teach this class specifically to couples who were expecting. Uh, I would say their first. I don't think they had to be their first child, but they were expecting a child, and most people would come there and they think they were going to learn parenting class, like it was going to be about parenting, but really it was about the relationship. But I remember when we would talk about feeling anger, feeling stress, like these things, we would have to give us, we would have this pink sheet that had all these filling words on it. And really it was for the men, but we were really trying to make sure that everybody understood, like, these are the feelings. Anger is not the only, because that's the quick one, but not, but to understand, like, oh, I feel sad, I feel
Mhm.
disappointed. Like these were really challenging for a lot of guys, and we were utilizing this because we were teaching them the XYZ skill to say, so if your wife comes home and the house isn't clean, you say, "Man, when I came home from work this evening, I felt unappreciated." It's like because you got to add that filling word on it because sometimes they won't hear it until there's that filling word added to it. But I mean, I feel like that's spot on there, like huge as far as what you just said regarding understanding that. That's really cool too that you called the person to try to figure out and get something out of it. You got something out of it,
Well,
man. That's
it
incredible.
it it got to the point where I said, I ain't telling you nothing no more. I'm just like, I'm tired. I'm not gonna tell you anything. I don't How do you feel? Like, I don't know how I feel. And she was like, you don't even have a clue. I said, I just told you. It was like, so
Yeah.
I said, I ain't telling you nothing no more. So yeah.
Yeah, man. Um, why do you think it's so important for a leader to actually know himself, for a man to know himself, his strengths and his flaws? Why do you think that's important?
Wow, man, especially in leadership. I think men should know that too. And all of us are leaders in some aspect, but the higher you go up in leadership, and I guess what I mean by that is the more people you impact, I should say. It's even more important to know your weaknesses and your strengths because you need to know your blind side. Because as you're leading people, people are following you, and there are times that their livelihood depends on the decisions you make. So, for example, um, I remember in college, one of the lessons the Lord taught me is I was working on a project with a group of people, and I thought I was the best presenter just naturally. But I didn't want to go, I'm the best presenter, so I should be presenting everything, right? So when it came time to present in front of the other class, in front of the rest of the class, we kind of divvied it up amongst all five of us. Each of us had a presentation. Well, at the end, the class counted us off because they said Jonathan should have been the main presenter because he's at the best, that's his skill set. So literally in my mind, I didn't want to because I thought they feel a certain kind of way,
Mm,
but that was the best thing for the team because of the grade. That's what they told us. And so if I would have thought about it, because there was a guy on our team that did all the stats and the graphics, and I said, he needs to be a part of the presentation because he did all these graphics. What I should have done is said, I think I'm the strongest presenter, but I'll make sure you get props because I'll call you out that you did all this work. That's what I should have did. And that way I would have been presenting because that's my skill set. We would have got a better grade. So because of my decision, we all got a lower grade.
mm,
So it's like important to figure out what's the strength. So you should know your strengths too, because people need that. You know, your family needs it, the people you're leading. And I'm not good at stats. I'm okay at stats. I wasn't the best at stats, right? If you, I can work on your spreadsheet for a little while, but then, bro, it's gonna get to a minute. I'm like, I'm tired of the spreadsheet, bro. It's like I'm about to throw the computer out, right?
yeah.
So again, I think it's important because we all have blind spots. And so to be the best leader possible, it's important to know your strengths. What are you good at? And work on that, fine tune to get it better. And what are other people good at? And as a leader, if you put people in places where they're good at, they'll prosper.
Yeah.
They will come up with things that you never thought of. If you're encouraging that and nourishing that, they'll just blossom and they'll go, hey, I just thought of this. And it'll be just that much even better. And they're excited. So everybody goes farther, faster when you, as a leader, have the insight to identify other people's strengths and weaknesses and start with knowing your own. And it's a blessing to delegate and help people lead. So I think it is critical to know your strengths and weaknesses. And it's critical to be okay with sharing that and saying it. I'm not all that great at this, but it looks like you are. I think you should handle that. What do you think about that? And they go, oh, heck yeah. That doesn't make you less of a man because you say, I'm not that good at that. But there are many leaders who think saying I'm sorry is a sign of weakness, saying I'm not the best at this skill is a sign of weakness, saying they messed up is a sign of weakness, saying this failed. It's like, yo, that didn't go like I thought it would. So we know not to do that. Any ideas on what to do next? What I think we can do to get better is this, boom. But we have many leaders that think that is not true.
Do you have a tip for somebody to kind of help identify their strengths? And it's really interesting to me too. Like oftentimes we talk about high school, younger people not knowing their strengths are. doing those things. But the more I work with adults, like it's still something that even and it may be because we didn't intentionally help or have those conversations early. I can't think of anything in school now that really said, hey, these are the things to help you discover what your strengths are, especially if you didn't have a
Mhm.
mentor or somebody seeing it in you and speaking it into you. Any tips
Mhm.
though for somebody who later in life to kind of help discover that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would think about the things that you do well that come easy for you that people around you may stumble on. What are the things, and ask your personal board of directors about that. What do you do? They just, oh yeah, I do that. You don't even think about it. You know, that's a way of aligning that. And I'm sure there are some cool assessments online. Not all those are reputable, but find a reputable assessment online and check it out. But I think start out with thinking about things that you like and that you do well, and others have often asked you to do. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. This may be going back a little bit, but and it wasn't a question I had,
Mhm.
but I thought I'd ask what when somebody says, "What does it mean to be a man?" Like for you, do you how do you respond to that question? Has anybody ever asked you that? What does it mean to be a man?
What does it mean to be a man? That's a great question, especially in today's society. Just last week, somebody said, "Oh, you have kids?" I said, "Yeah," and I just met this person. I said, "Yeah, I have two, one of each." And she said, "One of each?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "Oh, so you're going to default to the Western way of describing gender?"
Mm,
I said, "Yeah, yeah." And it was just kind of interesting, that she was confused when I said that. So it just makes this kind of question even more important, I think, in today's society. And I think as Christians, as me being a servant and of Jesus Christ, even if people have different ideologies about gender, I think it's important for me to honor, love, and respect them as well, right?
yeah.
All people. But still in the response, it should be biblically based.
Mm,
And to be biblically based doesn't mean you hate somebody. To be
right.
biblically based doesn't mean that you are casting someone out, because that's not what Jesus did, right? So I think when I think about being a man, I think it's somebody that takes accountability and responsibility and leads in his family. That's important to me. And I know some people may not understand what that is. Well, what if I don't have children, right? What if I'm not married? It's still a part of responsibility as a man, right? And it's a protector of people that are weaker than you, women and children. Now, when I say weaker, I'm not talking about intelligence,
Hmm.
right? So I think it should be obvious when you are looking out for other people intentionally. To me, that is a trait of a man, looking out for the best of others on purpose, intentionally, being proactive about that. So that's a few things that I think that identify a man.
That's good. What what do you think men tend to struggle with the most, but are usually too afraid to talk about?
Struggle with the most, but are too afraid to talk about. I would say their fears, because again, that's one of those things that you just, I know for me growing up, that's just something you didn't talk about. You just didn't. So I think they're fears because we all fear something. And I think that everybody struggles with that and afraid to talk about it. And I think the conversation is, well, why are you afraid of that? Some of us are afraid of nobody liking me or being left. Am I going to live the rest of my life alone? Am I going to, this runs in my family. Am I going to be a victim of that too? So I think that is an issue. And what I love about the word of God, it tells us that, he did not give us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind.
Amen.
And I had to just to remind myself that this morning, you know, I, I'm like, man, are my kids okay? You think about just, because now my kids are away from it, right? It's like, are they okay? Are they making right decisions? Are they around people that are influencing them the right way? Those kind of things can just like, if you let it get to you, bro, it's like, you can just, man, have I accomplished all that I have accomplished? I'm
Yeah.
getting older now. You can just kind of, and I think fear is something that all men deal with and are afraid to talk about it. I'm not saying it's easy, but I do think that's one of those things.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And fear holds us back. I think fear can cause us not to be the men that God's called us to be. When we talk about leading and being responsible and all those things, and I think fear keeps us from. Fear can hold us in the position of pride. We're too prideful to go out and just really do the things that are needed to take care of our family because of how we feel like people are going to see us and things of that nature. I we do these roundtables monthly, Christian based,
Mhm.
and you've been a part of. You've spoken one up before. We recently talked about the roles of men in the church, specifically the local church. I know you're involved in your church. Why do you think that men don't? And this, to me, I'm a pastor of a church, so I can kind of speak to this. Men don't show up
Yeah,
in the way that women do, but we are the ones called to lead. And and when I think about leading, I think about Paul when he says, "Follow me as I follow Christ." I think that's the responsibility. Men, love your wife as Christ loves the church. Why do you think that is that we don't show up as I would think we should in the local church? Or do you have a different opinion on
that's a great question, bro. And I'm gonna try to be succinct to my response.
that?
I think it's two major things, right? I was in Georgia. We spent the last 7 years living in Forsyth County, Georgia, up north. Um, I went to a thing called Leadership Foresight, a program for leaders. And I remember one day, one of my colleagues in Leadership Foresight, she said, my son thinks that Jesus must have been a wimp. And she said, I was so heartbroken when I heard him say that. She says, basically, when you hear the way leaders describe men these days on TV and on radio and in the news, Jesus was a wimp. He wasn't demeaning people. He wasn't. And I was like, wow, if he thinks he's thinking Jesus wouldn't make it today because he's a wimp, because what man has determined is manly. And that just blew my mind. I'm like, what are we doing
Yeah.
if he has this image? The words out of the mouth of children are powerful. So the reason I say that is that I believe many men think that and don't say it. So they think, oh, church, I'm not sure that's the strong thing for me, right? And I think what goes along with that is that some men believe if I'm in church to be a leader, that means I'm a pastor. I don't want to be a pastor. So, well, that means what other role is there for me? All the other roles are kind of wimpy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think that's a misnomer that you can only lead by being a pastor in a church, and that's the only role for men. I think that's wrong. I think there is a misconception about the strength of Christ Jesus and how he is in his character. He was no wimp, right? So I think for some people that are not familiar with the word, they have that image of Christ. I think the other one is that we've let it happen. One of the churches and what I mean by that, one of the churches, well, the only church I served in when I lived in Georgia was Eagles Nest Church. Shout out to Pastor Lee Allen Jenkins there in Roswell, Georgia. And he intentionally had men as ushers men serving to hold the doors. So when you rolled up, you men serving in the parking lot. Nothing against women. Women are amazing, but he knew the women would step up. So he intentionally called on men. So you roll up there, you see men doing a bunch of stuff in the parking lot, holding the door for you. All the men were ushers. So you're just like, wow. And he's like, women, I want to give you a break and have these men stand up and serve like they should. And it was the first time I'd really seen that. And I think if we did more of that intentionally, men would go, oh, there are other guys serving. Well, I'm going to serve. I'm not letting my serve me, right? And so we have a chance to turn it around. But I think, and some of it, I think, is culturally, not all of it. What we said, we just let the women take the lead when it came to spiritual things for whatever reason. And I was glad to be a part of seeing that turned around. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, that's good. No, I think that's really good. And I think what I hear you saying is kind of like we got to start positioning men in ways that allow for other men to see like this is manly, or this is something that a role that men can play as well. And again, that's kind of like worship. Like men just sitting there stoic. Like our sons are watching us. Like if we're gonna show our
That's right.
children how to reverence God and to love, we gotta be able to do that, and so they can watch us. And I love the thought of most more things are caught than taught, and they catch us
Yes.
seeing it, and it's a big deal. So, man, just a couple more questions because I don't want to be I want to be mindful of your time. How can men do a better job of balancing their work lives with being present for their families?
I think priorities, I think again, submit that we work, 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 and our role is to make the money and then let the spouse raise the kids. I think that's a myth. I think it's a partnership. I think that if you understand that, then you go, man, one of the highest priorities is to the Lord, to your spouse, and to your children. But also, if you shuffle that a little bit, inspire to the Lord and to yourself, because if you don't take good care of yourself in the right way, not a selfish way, you really can't take care of your spouse and your children because you're all broken down and you know what I mean,
Yeah.
not emotionally healthy. So I think if they got the priorities right and understood that if you are not there in the home influencing to your point of more is caught than taught, they're going to catch it from somewhere else.
Mm.
And so I have a regret that Jonathan BC, I could always tell a woman that didn't have a good relationship with her father. And it was easy to convince them I was the man
Mm.
because I could say certain things and because I knew what was missing. And and so I literally said all that was missing in their life. And so I remember talking to a group earlier a couple of weeks ago, and I said, if you don't spend that time listening to that daughter when she's 6, being there when she's 6, there's going to be a Jonathan BC at 16 that's going to be waiting for her. I promise you. So I think if we as men understood the value of being in the home, being present, listening, strategically. I'm not saying stay at home and don't work, but when you know that it's a priority, you got to figure it out with your partner and say, okay, we obviously got to make money. And it could be a thing where you have that conversation with the kids. Look, for the next 3 months, daddy's going to be working on weekends. But the reason I'm working on the weekends so we can do this and we do this and we can have fun in the summertime. And I got to get ready for you guys to go to school, but it's just right now. So I'm going to love you. I may not be around as much. So when I get home, I need some quick hugs and kisses and quick story time. And you need to be ready to get into bed because, this is what's going on. They go, oh, okay. And I think that we need to be strategic about it and not just go to the default of, I'm going to work, you raise the kids, I bring the money home. There may be seasons where that has to happen.
Yeah.
But I think if we are revealed to the truth about those things and prioritize accordingly, we can make that change.
That's good. Last question. How do you think older men can do a better job of helping younger men find their purpose in life?
I think one of the ways older men can help younger men find their purpose is build the relationship. I think that you got to have relationship equity.
Mm.
Just because, you 30 years older than me and you got a whole bunch of gray hair, and you've been through some stuff, don't mean you know what you're talking about. It's just like, you just don't. It don't. And we should honor our elders, period.
Yeah.
Right? So I can honor you as you're older, and there's something that I don't know because you have a little longer than me. So I need to glean from you and honor and respect you. But me as the older person, I can't just walk up to some dude and start talking to him. Well, bro, look, I'm older than you, so you need to listen to me. Be like, yo, dude, I don't even know you. You know what I mean? You don't even, there's no relationship equity. And I think people discount that. And I think it's more important now than it was before. I think in my dad's time when I was coming up, it was probably just more, it was just easier to listen to older men. But I think now, just with the information age and with some of the things that have happened, so I need to understand that I need to build a relationship with this young person. And then I build a relationship, have relationship equity, then they're listening to me.
Yeah.
I just think we need to say that. That doesn't mean that they're stupid for not listening to me first. That doesn't mean that I'm dumb. I just believe that I think people discount the importance of building a relationship first. And so I think we as older men need to do that. I mean, I'm at that point now. I'm the older dude now. So maybe if I listen to you first and you go, oh, he actually listens to me. One of the amazing things to build a relationship with people, like in networking, I used to teach people love the sound of their name,
Mm.
you know? So learn their name, repeat their name, and go, Hetty, tell me again, why are you doing these podcasts? Why are you trying to learn from men? It's phenomenal. Hetty, did you get that idea from somebody else? Or it just kind of came to you? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And then naturally that person goes, and they start talking to you,
Yeah.
right? So if people love the sound of their name psychologically, use that. And people also love the sound of their voice. Maybe not watching a video back, they're like, but in their own ears, people like that. So if you use their name, let them talk and use the sound of their voice and just ask questions. Ask questions creates relationships, creates that equity, creates that other word that I can't think of right now. But when you do those three things, and then they may go, well, hold on. Can we get together? It's been great talking to you. Can I? And then at that point, you have the relationship equity, and then you pour into them. But you gotta give something first. And in this situation, I think give is interest, acknowledgement, and a listening ear. Then I have the chance to pour into them. That's what I think is a great way for us to do it now that I'm in the older stage. And some of us don't think we need to do that because it wasn't done for us.
Yeah.
You don't automatically have access to these people just because you're 20, 30 years older.
Yeah. That's good, man. Jonathan, I sure do appreciate that. Really great wisdom, things that I definitely think I can take from this and make sure that I can either pass it on and then make it also applicable to my own life. And so, thank you so much, Jonathan. You got any last words that you want to share? Any shout outs? Anything you want to say?
Thank you for this opportunity. I am glad to be back in the city that raised me. My man, if there's anything that I can do for you, please let me know and I'll be there.
Man, I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for hitting that play button for another episode of Learning from Men podcast, where we are on a mission to learn from men so that we can better serve men. Brought to you by Men of Jesus. Shout out to the 5+2 after school leadership entrepreneurship program for eighth grade boys. We are continuing to not only serve men, but also young men because we believe better men, better families, better communities. Go win.